Okay. First of all, let me just quickly do a brief introduction because I have
Okay.
a community, a group of people called
Okay.
Young Professionals Academy. So I'm going to share this with them. Recently, we
Okay.
had a discussion and we talked about disruptive skills, and they
Got it.
wanted to know more about this. And I'm going to share this with them. So thank you. Let me just quickly do a brief introduction. Whitney
Okay.
Johnson is the CEO of WLJ Advisor and one of the 50 leading business thinkers in the world, as named by Thinkers 50 recently. So she's an expert on helping high growth organizations develop high growth individuals. Whitney is an award-winning author, a world-class keynote speaker. So welcome here with me, Whitney Johnson. So thank you, Whitney.
Thank you, Adedoyin, for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. So let's quickly go over to the question.
Yep.
First of all, Whitney, what are disruptive skills?
It's such a great question. And when you think about disruptive skills, I've outlined in my book, Disrupt Yourself, a 7-point framework of personal disruption. And I recognize that in Nigeria, it might not be possible to get a copy of the book, but if you listen to the podcast episodes, Disrupt Yourself, episode 100 and 120, you can start to get a feel for what they are. But here's what it is at its simplest. A disruptive skill is something that you do well, that people around you don't. And part of the reason it's disruptive is because it's so easy for you, so natural, so reflexive, you don't actually value it. And so you think of it as this silly little thing, and yet that silly little thing that you do very, very well that you don't value is what's going to allow you to basically take over, if not the world, certainly your world. And some of the ways that you can figure out what your disruptive skills are is to ask yourself 3 questions. One of them is, what makes you feel strong? And if you're saying to yourself, well, I don't know what makes me feel strong, over the next couple of days, every time you've finished doing something, ask yourself, like, do I have more energy right now? Do I feel like good? And if so, then that's a signal that this is a strength. If you find yourself feeling really depleted when you're finished, just exhausted, that might be a signal that it's not a strength. And so you'll see this pattern that's pointing you in the direction of what makes you feel strong. The second question that you can ask yourself to figure out what your disruptive skills are is, what frustrates you or exasperates you? If you find yourself in a situation when someone says, well, that was really great how you did that, and you're like, oh, anybody can do that. Like, that's just common sense. Or you find yourself like, why don't they get it? Like, and it could be something simple like, how come they don't have a good sense of direction? Or how come they can't spell very well? Whatever it might be. Those are things that are strengths of yours that you want to make sure that you're aware of. And as you're going about your career and deciding which role you're going to take or which job you're going to take, make sure that you're leveraging those. And then the third clue that I want to give you to figure out what your disruptive skills are is to look at what compliments people give you. When it's so easy when someone says, hey, you did X, Y, Z really well, to just deflect it and say, oh, no, I don't do that well. Or even say to yourself, well, they say that all the time. Like when I was a little girl, people would tell me, you play the piano really well. And I did not like that compliment. I got so tired of it. I wanted people to say, well, you do this, or you do that, or this other thing really well. Not recognizing that the fact that I played the piano well was a strength that I have, and how could I use that, and how could I leverage that? So the 3 clues that I want to give you are, number 1, what makes you feel strong, number 2, what frustrates you or exasperates you, and number 3, what compliments do you dismiss, and then recognize that what powers are often going to be things you overlook. And yet, if you want to be successful in your life, in your career, you're going to identify those things that you do extremely well and figure out how to do them even better. So that's a quick overview of a disruptive skill.
Oh, wow. Thank you. So could we then say that there is a significant difference between a normal skill that someone has, what you call me too skill? So there's a significant difference between disruptive skills and the Me Too skills.
That's interesting. So when you say Me Too skills, Adedoyin, are you saying, so everybody else does that and I do it too? Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're describing?
Exactly. That's the normal skill that people have. Yes, that's what I'm describing.
Yeah. So here's what I would say to you. I think that there's some value in Me Too skills, and the way I would think about them are sort of skills that you have to have in order to get in the door. But then once you have that skill, then what are you going to do to differentiate yourself? And let me give you an example from my own career that I think will illustrate this really well. So when I first started working on Wall Street, and I was an equity research analyst and picking stocks and building these financial models and deciding if it was a buy or a sell, the Me Too skill that you're talking about, the skill that allowed me to get in the door, was the ability to understand accounting, to read a balance sheet, to build a financial model. So those were the table stakes skills that I needed to have in order to get this job. But what I would say to you is those skills that I had, while they were important, they were necessary in order for me to do this job, they were not sufficient for me to be great. So I was good at building a financial model, but I wasn't great at it. And so what allowed me to become great as an analyst was not only having that Me Too skill, but then looking at what I did distinctively well. And what were those things that I did unusually well? Number one is I'm really good at spotting momentum. I'm good at spotting momentum with stocks, but I'm also good with spotting momentum in people. And then the other thing that I was really good at is sort of understanding and the psychology of people and why they would do what they would do. And so one of my best stock calls was predicting that the son of the owner of a company was going to feel this need in order to prove himself. And because he wanted to prove himself, he was going to figure out a way to turn around the company. And so it was understanding the psychology of why people do what they do that helped to make a really good stock call. So you've got to have these basic skills and go out and get them, whatever that job requires. But it's the disruptive skills, the things that you do unusually well, that are going to allow you to really distinguish yourself in your career, in your profession, et cetera. So that's the difference between the Me Too and the disruptive skills.
Good. Okay, that's very fine. I think I have a better understanding now. So that leads us to another question. So would you suggest how an individual, now you've given an idea. So would you suggest an individual can develop his disruptive skills among several others?
Restate that question because I'm not sure I understood it. Can you ask the question again?
How would an individual develop his disruptive skills among several others? Skills?
So develop those along with the other skills that they need? Is that the question?
Yes, that they need.
Okay. So I think there's no science to it. I think what I would say is, to the extent that you can go to school, and one of the beauties of where we are in our society right now is you don't necessarily have to go to school. Like, if there's something you want to learn, you can learn it on YouTube, which is amazing. So I think what I would say to you is, if there's skills, if there's something that you want to get done and there's a skill that you don't have, and you're realizing that you're going to have it. Like, you can't partner with someone who knows how to do it. For example, we have a diagnostic for our business that we need to build. I'm not going to go out and get the skill to figure out how to build the diagnostic. I'm going to hire someone to do it. But once you identify some skills, you're like, okay, I need to have this skill. Then you either go to school, you go to YouTube, you go to Coursera, but you figure out a way to get that skill. You teach yourself how to do that. But at the same time, you want to have these things kind of running in tandem. Is okay, so what's that skill? And I'm going to be working on gaining that skill. But don't focus on that skill to the exclusion of the other things that you do well. And in fact, what I would say to you is, if there are things that you already naturally, instinctively do well, how can you leverage those strengths that you have in order to be able to help you figure out this other piece or this other part of the business that you need to figure out how to do? So I think that's how I would look at it, is like, there's an art and there's a science to it, but I would do the two in tandem of, here are the skills that I need, here are the skills that I already have. Don't set aside what you already have and only focus on what you need, because what you're doing then is you're not focusing on your strengths. And if you think about any sort of job, yes, you have to mitigate the things that you don't do quite as well, but the way you're going to get idiosyncratically great is to focus on what you do best. So I would do the two in tandem, and focus as much as you can on the things that you already do naturally well.
Okay, that's fine. That's great. So let me quickly ask you this question, because it's very important. The people that we're talking to are young graduates. Some of them also are recent graduates. Okay. So let me ask, how can a recent graduate who looks to make a huge impact in the world of work apply the principle of self-disruption, even though the person is just coming into the world of work newly?
Yeah, it's a great question, Joanne. So here's what I would say is we have a framework of the S curve of learning framework, and it looks like this. So everybody who's watching the video, and what the S curve of learning framework is it basically helps you understand how you grow. So whenever you start a new job or you start a new role, you're at the bottom of that S. And what we know from the math around that S is that growth is going to feel like it's really slow. You're lots of stuff you don't know how to do. You're going to have to figure it out. There are days where you're like, oh, I don't know if I should have taken this on. So you want to recognize that whenever you start something new, you're going to be at the bottom of this S, and it's going to feel somewhat discouraging and maybe even overwhelming. And the thing that you need to know is that's completely natural. Like, that is normal and natural. So as you're starting your first job, there's going to be 3 to 6 months where you're like, oh, why did I take this on? I don't know what I'm doing. That's because you're at the bottom of the S and you might feel kind of discouraged. But then as you put in the effort, you're going to accelerate into the sweet spot of that S, where now in a little time, a lot happens. Whereas at the low end, it took a lot of time for a little to happen. So you're starting to know enough, but not too much. And things are hard, but not too hard, easy, but not too easy. And you just feel exhilarated, like you're really enjoying the work that you're doing. And then you're going to get to the top of that S, and you're going to be really good at what you're doing in this particular job, but you're now no longer growing. And so whereas at the low end you felt overwhelmed, now you feel underwhelmed, and what you need is a new challenge. And so understand that everyone's on an S curve of learning. Every role, every job you take, you're basically this learning machine. You want to not know how to do stuff. You're going to figure it out. You're going to get into this groove. And then when you get to the top and you're about ready to capitulate, you know that you have to jump in order to start over again. So that's how we grow. And so one of the things I want you to think about in your career is that every time you take on a new role, you're on this S. And when you get to the top of the S, instead of staying there and just sort of coasting, say, okay, what do I need to do in order to either push myself back down into the sweet spot, giving myself a new stretch assignment, figuring out how I can do my work better, or do I need to jump to the bottom of a new learning curve? So you're going to learn and you're going to leap and you're going to repeat. And when you understand that, that's going to allow you to really systematically move through your career. You've already done it a lot. You did it in secondary school. You may have done it in college. And so now you just want to use this framework to manage your career. And as you do that, you're going to be able to learn, leap, and repeat, and be successful in this idea of disrupting yourself. And it will also obviously help the organizations that you work for.
Okay, that's good. So on this S-curve framework, everybody can fit into the S-curve framework. Is that what you are saying? Whether you are a graduate, right, you are a mid-level executive, you are a senior level executive, you can fit into the S-curve framework. Is that so?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Well, have a wonderful day, and I've got another call that I've got to hop to, but it's lovely to talk with you, and I'll look forward to the next time we chat.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.